only two types of people really oppose pornography. People that either don't know what they're talking about or the ones who don't know what they're missing. Hustler is nothing more than a mirror that reflects the private fantasies of the individual readers. What we tend to forget is that the newsstand is the poor man's art museum. The rich and the privileged have the erotic art museums. And Hustler really appeals to blue-collar America. It's as commonplace in America as apple pie.
You say that, and you make a very convincing case, but in fact, aren't you really just trying to put a gloss on what is a very tacky business?
Not necessarily. Look, Moses freed the Jews, Lincoln freed the slaves. And Larry Flynt with Hustler magazine would like to free a lot of neurotics. Besides, I think a copy of Hustler magazine is a lot cheaper than a psychoanalyst anyway.
You really believe that?
I believe it.
I mean, it's not the justification of a rich man for what he does.
Not really, because I think the sooner we bring pornography out in the open, the sooner people are going to see it for what it really is, and there's nothing more boring. And repression just makes it popular.
And Larry Flynt, a rich fellow.
Well, now, if you were talking to the publisher of the New York Times, you wouldn't necessarily be talking about how much money he makes or how rich he is.
In this debate going on right now, obscenity and the law, what's obscene, what's not obscene, a lot of people feel caught in the middle because, well, on the one hand, they're appalled by pornography. They do believe in freedom of speech, freedom to publish, and they don't want to come to the aid of a Larry Flynt.
I understand this perfectly well, but there's no such thing as being a little bit pregnant. And let's face it, a lot of the individual liberties that we gained by the very liberal Warren Court have been placed in jeopardy by the conservative Supreme Court that we now have. Their recent rulings involving the First Amendment have literally sown dragon's teeth in the fertile soil of the First Amendment. And we have to do something about it. Freedom is not always recognizable. It's not just limited to 60 Minutes or the New York Times. It also means Hustler magazine or an X-rated movie playing in a nice neighborhood. But, a few years back, it was some young boys saying, "Hell no, I won't go." And then it was some hard-ats riding down Main Street saying, "Love it or leave it." And the sad thing about it is, if this freedom don't exist for some of us today, it may not exist for any of us tomorrow. And it's beyond me to understand that how a country founded on the printed word, at its 200th birthday, that people can still be questioning what kind of book that you can read or what kind of movie that you can see. When the government interferes in this, they're interfering with our thought process. No one has a right to do that. And if I have to go to jail to prove my point, I will do just that. I decided a long time ago, if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. I'm not rolling over and playing dead for him or any other prosecutor in America. And as long as I'm alive and able to publish my magazine, I'll do just that. And if they don't like it, they can piss up a rope. And that goes from the president right on down to the very lowest prosecutor, because this country belongs to me as much as it belongs to them. I'm not defying the law, but we're either living in a free country or we're not. One of the greatest rights that any nation can afford its people is the right to be left alone. And the only thing that I'm saying to the censors is me and my 15 million readers deserve a right to be left alone. If you don't like Hustler magazine, don't read it. But don't try to tell somebody else that they can't read it.
In an open letter to the President, Flynt claimed the protection of the First Amendment to the American Constitution, which guarantees freedom of the press and freedom of speech.
And let us not lose sight of one of the most important things that I'll say during the course of this interview. That 86% of all the literature suppressed in the Soviet Union is done so with obscenity statutes. America is the strongest country in the world today only because it's the freest country in the world. And if it ever loses sight of its basic heritages and the principles involved, we may no longer be free.
Can you honestly believe that the kind of things that you print in your magazine should be defended under the name of freedom?
Yes, I do. I think freedom is limited to all forms of expression and not just the printed word. You can't say we're going to let this person have freedom and this person not, I mean, you just don't draw the line on free expression. But our First Amendment gets its vitality and meaning from that unrestricted right of free choice. And there's no compromises. And part of being free is tolerating things you don't necessarily like. You pay a price for everything, and that's the price. That we're living in the freest country in the world only because we have a free choice. And I believe if we lose sight of our basic heritages and the principles involved, that we may no longer be free. And that's not patriotic rhetoric, it just happens to be a matter of fact. I don't feel freedom of choice is lost in one move. I think it's lost a book at a time, a magazine at a time, or a movie at a time. The censors are very quick to point out today that Hustler is trash, that it's not the classics, that you cannot put it in the same category with Ulysses. Well, I hope we don't forget that Ulysses, Fanny Hill, even Esquire magazine was at one time all considered to be trash. We pay a price for everything, and the price we pay for freedom is tolerating things that we don't necessarily like. Freedom is not limited to the Atlanta Constitution, CBS, NBC, or ABC. It means a lot of things. It's an adult bookstore, an X-rated movie playing in a nice neighborhood. A few years ago, it was some long-haired kids saying about an unjust war. Hell no, I won't go. And after that, it was some hard hats riding down Main Street saying love it or leave it. It's women's rights, civil rights, leather jackets, flags sewn on the seat of somebody's trousers, right to work billboards. That's what freedom's about. It depresses me to see how many Americans take it for granted. Believe me, we can't. We, everyone, have to stand up to be counted in this battle. And I don't feel that I'm just here for myself. I feel that I'm here for every other American, because if I put these magazines back on the streets in Atlanta, the people that were buying them before will have a right to buy them. That's why I'm here. I don't need the money. I'm not running for political office. We're either living in a free country or we're not. Realize how ridiculous these obscenity laws are. I don't feel the government has any business legislating morality.
How many charges have been placed against you?
3 charges, as I understand it. I'm not all that familiar with them myself.
So what kind of bail did you have to put up?
$25,000 bond.
What happened this morning?
I was arrested for obscenity.
What were you doing when you were arrested? You had finished selling.
I had finished selling the magazine. I was back at the hotel, and the lieutenant came in and served the warrant.
And what was your remark when he arrested you?
Okay. I didn't really have one.
Were you about to have left town? I mean, were you finished selling the magazine? Were you leaving Atlanta?
Yes, I was getting ready to leave simply because I felt that they were not going to arrest me, that if they had intentions of it, they would have arrived early.
You made no remark
this morning when you weren't arrested. How do you feel now?
Well, I don't feel good about any of this, but I'm happy that the people in Atlanta are taking it seriously, because I'm trying to draw attention on something that I feel is an injustice and an infringement upon our individual rights, and that is to have the ability to read whatever book that we choose.
You made no remark whatsoever when the lieutenant put you under arrest?
Pardon?
You made no remark to him whatsoever when he put you under arrest?
No, he was just doing his job.
What are you going to do now?
No, I will probably be convicted. Everybody has preconceived ideas about the concept of obscenity, and it really boils down to a question of taste rather than a matter of law.
Why did you choose to fight it here in Atlanta?
I think Atlanta was just a straw that broke the camel's back.
Where do you go from here?
Well, I'm going to be in court Monday morning, and I guess we'll have a trial.
You're going to stay in Atlanta over the weekend?
Come Monday morning. There's legal expenses. I can't serve their jail time for them, but that's as much as I can do. Now, I can give them the financial backing, but I just simply cannot give them the courage to stand up to Henson McCullough. They've got to find that within themselves.
You said this morning.
Did you happen to bring a copy of Hustler with you? Did you have any with you when you were arrested?
No, I did not.
Is any city...
Look, I don't consider this. I'm not running. Take an outsider to come into.
Say 200.
Neither. Or People magazine, for that matter. I've seen a couple of four-letter words in there a few weeks ago. But I think they did have the unrestricted right of free choice for each American in mind. And that's a whole issue. That's what we're talking about. The right of every American to make his decision as to what type of reading material that he wants to read. I have confidence in the American people and the citizens of Fulton County that they can read any book or magazine without being corrupted. I am an American citizen. I have the right to do this, and every living American has the right to decide if he wants to buy and read Hustler magazine. Simon Lease doesn't have to read the publication. His neighbors doesn't like to read it. But I know that there's not a single one of you want him telling you what you can or cannot read. That's the whole point, and that's why everyone is here today. Look, we're the strongest country in the world today, only because we are the freest country in the world today. And I don't want any American, anywhere, to ever forget that that strength lies in our principles to be free. And I'll continue this fight. And people will accuse me of continuing it in the name of pornography. I continue it in the name of freedom.
In fighting pornography. With Jim Lehrer in Miami, that's what we consider tonight. Jim?
Robin, the Hustler case, of course, is the freshest and possibly the most far-reaching of the three. Last week, on February 8th, an Ohio State court jury in Cincinnati found Hustler publisher Larry Flynt guilty of pandering obscenity and engaging in organized crime. He was given the maximum sentence in both, 6 months on the pandering charge and from 7 to 25 years on the organized crime conviction. There was a dispute over conditions of a $55,000 bail, and that was not resolved until Monday by an appeals court. Flynt was released from the Cincinnati jail then and is now here in Miami, where he has a house nearby. First, Mr. Flynt, what is your legal situation now? You are appealing the verdict. Are you prepared to appeal it all the way, or where are you right now?
Well, naturally, I want to appeal it all the way. And, of course, we're hopeful that the decision will be reversed on an appellate level. We were all quite shocked that the verdict was returned in the first place.
What is this doing to your magazine? Are you, is it going to put you out of business, or is all the publicity actually helping the magazine?
No, I won't deny the publicity is really helping the magazine. I have orders for 2 million copies of the March issue that I can't even fill now. And,
how many? What would be a normal run, say, for March?
3 million copies.
I see, but you got 2 million extra.
Yes, we got orders for 5 million copies. But what people don't realize about Hustler, and that's why the verdict shocked everybody, is it's not a hardcore magazine sold in adult bookstores. Hustler's distributed worldwide in over 25 different countries, in the process of being translated into 7 other languages. And the verdict just really took everybody by surprise.
You don't feel that the people of Cincinnati had the right to do to you what they did?
No, and I think the dangers inherent in what happened is that many producers and publishers will shelve creative ideas and thoughts because they might be offensive to the most conservative community standards. And I think this has just brought out into the light just what a bad decision that was by the Supreme Court in the Miller case, leaving it up to individual communities to set their own standards. It's my feeling that a community sets its standards by economic support of magazines and books. And you know, our First Amendment gets its vitality and meaning from an unrestricted right of free choice. And it doesn't say we're going to give freedom to some people and not others. And that's why so many people are alarmed about it and are coming to my defense, not only with editorial support in the media, but in many different ways. And it's not that they're defending Larry Flynt or Hustler magazine. And many of these people have told me, I'm not proud of what you do in Hustler magazine, but I'm proud that I live in a country where I have a choice to buy it if I want to, and it has a right to exist.
Well, you know, in fact, some of the very people who are supporting you have made it very clear that they consider your magazine a tasteless, worthless piece of trash, as a matter of fact. Does that bother you at all?
It doesn't bother me at all because Hustler is as much a humor magazine as it is a sex magazine. We're to magazine publishing what Saturday Night Live or Mary Hartman is to television. And we must remember that if we had not seen a movie since 1940, we would be offended by something with a PG rating. But often when you deal with satire, and especially when you mix it with sex, it can be offensive. But we're talking about taste. And when a community makes a decision with a jury verdict, like happened in Cincinnati, although we did not get a fair trial, and probably Mr. Farringer could elaborate on the legal issues later on.
Who we're going to be talking to in
yes.
a moment. Yes.
But aside from that, it's just a chilling thought that one community can... What really happened by that verdict, in more simpler terms, is they've got publishers and producers trying to second-guess what community standards are in Biloxi, Mississippi, or Little Rock, Arkansas. And it's just really amazing.
Well, that's, of course, the crux of the thing, and that's what we want to explore tonight. Thank you.
Now, I think most of the social scientists in the country today would all agree that exposure even to hardcore pornography, and this was a consensus of the Presidential Commission on Obscenity, is not harmful to the average person and won't alter your sexual desires. So really, for a moment, we can eliminate effects. The major question here is the First Amendment issue. You know, Harry Truman once said, freedom rings the loudest when opinions clash. Now, if we all agreed on Hustler, we wouldn't be sitting here doing this show now. So there's differences of opinion in every community. So I think while we're trying to protect the rights of some, we cannot forget the rights of others. And I think the answer, you know, we're all discussing the issues, but nobody's discussing the answer. I think the answer lies in some sort of peaceful coexistence. We should respect one another's rights to read books and go to the movies, just like we respect each other's right to worship and vote as we choose. Nobody should be telling the other person what they can read or see. And that's, the issue is really very simple. It's not a complex one. The only thing is, when you get bad, antiquated laws, conspiracy laws, where they can reach out in the country and nab anybody they want to, and one person can get 30 days for murder, another person can get 25 years for publishing a book, that's ridiculous.
I assume you would agree, Mr. Farringer.
Yes, and I wanted to just add one other thing, Jim, to what he said that is very troublesome to me. You know, when our forefathers designed the First Amendment, they gave to everyone, including publishers, the right to say what they please, even though it might be poorly exercised or displeasing to those in places of power. But they did it because they knew that was the only way we could conduct a representative democracy. Now, there's much in Hustler magazine that people have labeled tasteless. But, you know, in a free society, we have to forbear. We have to put up with a lot that is unpleasant to us. A Supreme Court Justice of the United States once said that the price that we have to pay for a free press and free speech is that we have to put up with and even pay for a good deal of trash. And that's what we're talking about here. Everybody making their own choice as to what they want to read or see.
You don't buy that, Mr. Parrish?
Not at all. We're not talking about the First Amendment here, and to cast it into that language deceives people who think that we are.
We're talking about freedom of choice. That's what the First Amendment's all about. The right to a free choice.
Sure. Go ahead.
The Supreme Court, you could find the Supreme Court justice to have said anything over the years. Many of them are in dissenting opinions, though. But the point here...
That wasn't incidentally my comment.
The point here is that the Supreme Court has guaranteed through the Constitution, and I would literally fight a war over this principle, that anybody can advocate anything they want, they can express any ideas they want to. The thing that's regulated by obscenity laws is the mode and the manner of the advocacy. If someone wants to advocate nudity, that is fine, and nobody, no law anywhere can ever be passed to say you cannot advocate nudity. But a law can be passed that says you can't use the mode of walking down the street naked to advocate that. And so it's the means and the mode of advocating the idea, not the idea. And what this First Amendment does is protects our right to advocate whatever we want to advocate, and no obscenity law anywhere does anything to prohibit us from doing that.
Well, I just don't want... I'm sorry.
All right.
Ron Miller from ABC.
Hi,
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
We're going to just take a little bit of film here before we get started.
I had a statement set up to read at the press conference, and then
Why don't you go ahead and pick up your statement where you think it's crucial to the general framework, and I told you where it should be, and then I will allow you to continue. As I said earlier, I hope you have energy for the day, because there seem to be an awful lot of people down there in line waiting to...
Freedom doesn't exist for some of us today. It may not exist for any of us tomorrow. You know, freedom is not lost in just one giant swoop. It's lost by first one book.
How important do you think your fight is in terms of the First Amendment?
I think it's very important, or I wouldn't be here. You know, freedom is not always recognized. It's not just limited to ABC. It means CBS, or Hustler Magazine, or Time Magazine. And if this that's one movie. You know, sure, maybe you guys couldn't come to the defense of Harry Reams in Memphis, or Al Goldstein in Wichita. Maybe you can't come to the defense of Larry Flynt in Cincinnati. But what's next? Playboy? If the censors of the 50s would have been successful, we may have been deprived of a very important of those other magazines into evidence as comparators, but they did. Took a look at my jury and says, if that's my peers, God help. But like the average reader, reading age.
Granted. You made I think your point on sexuality of your publication. I don't want to appear to be belaboring the point.
While we're protecting the rights of some, let's not forget the rights of others. Hustler has 15 million readers monthly. What about their rights? Now, I think the answer lies in coexistence. I'll respect the right of the man who doesn't want to read Hustler or Playboy, and I want him to respect my right, like we would the right of one to worship or to vote as he chooses. That's what a free society is all about. And I think we're going to have to face up to it, that many of the individual liberties that we gained by the liberal Warren Court have been placed in jeopardy by recent Supreme Court rulings. And again, America never wakes up till it's dumped right in their lap.
How many large communities are you not now distributing in?
Not very many at all. We have a very broad base of distribution throughout the United States.
I think that's fine if you can get some silent reversals.
Psychologists came down, average age of 46. Now you take the average guy that's 50 years old, he's never even seen the National Lampoon. He can't tell you the totality, that you're dealing with here. And like they had case law here that said that, if today, if someone hadn't been to the movies since 1940, they would be offended by a PG rating.
Have you been getting adequate support, do you think, from other magazines and people who are interested, in fact, in the...
Well, I am now that I'm in jail. But you heard the press conference that it's kind of...
I'm going to ask you remarks. I just think that unless it's so explicit that you're prepared to read it, it's up to you.
Well, I've been up, my head's not too clear because I've been up all night reading it, and I don't...
That's fine.
And...
How long do you think it is, Larry?
Okay.
Just generally. And I hope you have a great deal of energy, because I think you're going to be very tired by the end of the day.
This is a tape of a press conference that I held here for Ohioans for Free Press, begging for some help before this all came down.
like this, legal defenses or what have you. And I would like to see a good portion of all of the money that I make go towards causes such as this. You know, they're very quick to print some scandal. A company by the name of TG of my demographics. They got a few other clients like Time, Newsweek, the New York Times, Esquire, New Times. I could go on and on. So that's 15 million voices that has a right to be heard in this country. Now, we either have a free press or we...
One thing that I would like to touch on, which I think may be important here. Well, just some things which I don't know if you know or not, but never before in history.
As opposed to your notes for one second, Harry.
Okay.
This is something we just have to come up here. You're going to be a rather tired, hungry.
Statement made up to read at the press conference, and then
Point. But I'm curious as to what you consider to be your greatest defense in terms of the First Amendment question.
Don't start it yet. I haven't started it yet. Here, let me find. I lost my page. Okay. I'll keep it here. And these, you said First Amendment issues. So
Well, I think that's what we're mostly
to.
interested in.
Okay. Okay, and then I'll skip that next one and go on now. I've got a good one here for you. And I think it's good to advise you about it. Strictly First Amendment, this will be short. I can get all this in a minute or two, okay?
Go ahead.
I feel it's magazines like Hustler that need the First Amendment for protection, not Time or Newsweek. Could there have been a joy of sex without Ulysses? Or a fear of flying without Fanny Hill? Or a shampoo without I Am Curious Yellow? You know, my attorneys told me to remain silent so as not to prejudice my chances for bond. They asked that I not criticize the prosecutor or the judge, and that I promise not to distribute my magazine in this county. To do this would constitute the ugliest form of censorship of all, that of prior restraint. They're asking me to give up the right of every other American. This I cannot do, for I am proud of my American heritage and the principles it embodies. And to all who would ask me to lay down the principles, I say to them in the language that I know best, shove it.
Is there more statement?
I can give you all you want.
I'd like to, let's talk about that whole First Amendment question. I think your points are well taken, but I would like you to tell me why it is important, again, and you've done this already to a certain extent, why it's important for a magazine like Hustler, which many find to be perhaps, they don't like, let's just put it that way. Why it's important for your magazine and you to be protected by the First Amendment.
Well, as I said before, I don't think magazines like Time and Newsweek need protection for the First Amendment. But magazines like to tolerate things that you don't always like.
I'm sure you're aware of the argument or the question that has sometimes been asked that when the First Amendment was written, it was not written with the intention of protecting magazines or publishers who really seem to be more interested in picturing female genitals and that sort of thing than dealing with issues of literary substance. You know the argument.
We're talking about obscenity, and I feel it's very much like sin, the concept of sin. It defies definition. You know, there are those who would think that the Lenny Bruces, the Al Goldsteins, and the Larry Flints of the world need their mouth washed out with soap. When I started Hustler, I decided that I wanted to deal with sex as I knew it, on the farm, on the street, in the Navy, 4-letter words and all. I wanted to talk about sex as my friends really talked about it. The price I had to pay was my freedom. You know, my prison sentence is no longer a possibility. It's now a reality. It sets its own standards by the economic support of magazines and books. And I feel it's a chilling thought that one community will impose its standards on another.
Are you concerned? There's a general concern in the United States today about violence on television. A lot of advertisers have said they're not going to any longer advertise on violent programs on television. Are you concerned about what effect, another question you're well aware of, what effect your magazine might have on people's activities, whether it stimulates those who are unstable and all the rest of that kind of thing?
Most scientific research indicate that people are more apt to imitate violent behavior than they are sexual behavior. But I share a belief and a theory, and that is I feel that most of the social ills that exist in society today are caused by sexual repression, not sexual permissiveness. We fear sex, and we try to make it go away by hiding it. The schools won't teach sex. They're afraid to because of the parents, pressure from the parents.
Lawrenceville attorney Gene Reeves was on the sidewalk in a pool of blood. Ambulance crews had picked up Flynt moments earlier. He had been shot once in the stomach. The bullet which hit Reeves had apparently gone through an arm and slammed into his side. Flynt had spent all morning on the witness stand and was due up again in a few minutes until the shots rang out. Even people who were only a few feet away weren't positive what had happened.
Just hear the shot.
What did you see? Did you look out the window? Or?
No, sir. Couldn't look out the window. I was behind this building.
You came across the street then?
Yes, sir.
What did you see at that point?
Saw Mr. Reeves laying here and Mr. Flynn down there.
I saw Mr. Reeves, who's my next-door neighbor, and I tried to see his condition. Mr. Couch assured me that his condition was not serious.
All I seen was one man. He was hollering, "Help me," and then a friend of mine that was standing, that's going with my girl, said that there was another one shot, and I told him to get back in the house because they might shoot him.
Did you see anybody running away that like it might have been the gunman?
I seen one person running around the corner, and he was going so fast you couldn't really tell what he looked like.
Flynt and Reeves were rushed into the emergency room at Button Gwinnett Hospital. Flynt was conscious, but barely.
Well, he had just taken off his clothing, and I saw the wound. It was a terribly ugly hole on the one side of his stomach and an opening on the other side, the left side, appearing as though the bullet had gone in one side and gone out the other side.
Was he conscious?
Yes, he was, but he was in somewhat of a coma, and I said, "Larry, we're here with you," and he looked up, but I sensed that, he didn't hear me or didn't know because he just mumbled something, and I couldn't make out what it was.
During his morning on the witness stand, Flynt admitted he had done some things wrong with Hustler magazine, but promised changes have been made since his conversion to Christianity.
Well, there's a difference between doing something wrong and doing something that's obscene and illegal. I think it's wrong to portray a woman like this, and this is something that I had to realize and accept and ask forgiveness for when I accepted Christ into my life. But I don't think it's illegal. I think it's wrong to drink liquor, but not illegal. So I'm faced with the same type of decision here.
Some of the jurors who an hour earlier had listened to Flynt's testimony were nearby on the street when the shooting happened. They left horrified. Presiding Judge Huell Harrison was there under State Patrol guard. Just minutes later, he looked for a minute and then drove off to declare the case against Larry Flynt a mistrial. No one in county offices is able to predict whether another trial for Larry Flynt will be held. Neil Craig, 11 Alive News in Lawrenceville.
Are you known as Larry Flynt?
No, Jesus H. Flynt, Esquire.
Have you ever called yourself Larry Flynt?
Used to, but it was spelled with an I then. F-L-I-N-T, now it's F-L-Y-N-T. I have 2 birth certificates.
Were you born in Kentucky?
No.
Have you ever served in the United States Navy?
I'm not sure.
Have you ever lived in Dayton, Ohio?
No, I was hatched in Dayton, Ohio.
While you were in Dayton, Ohio, did you ever work in the nightclub business?
Huh?
Did you ever work in the nightclub business in or around Dayton, Ohio? Let the stenographic record reflect that Mr. Flynt has just picked his left nostril and placed on the floor some of the mucus that had coagulated there. Do you know what day today is, Mr. Flynt? Do you know who the man is to whom you pointed earlier and whom you said knocked out your tooth last night? Are you determined, Mr. Flynt, to make a mockery of this deposition? Do you wish to pretend that you don't understand my questions? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Sure. Yeah.
Would you ask him that question since you're the notary?
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony that I give is fair as the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, and I affirm to tell the truth, too.
All right. Who owns the stock in the Larry Flynt Corporation?
Joseph Bard, Jr. He's really my son. That's his.
Okay.
He's my natural son.
When you say natural son, are you using that in the 19th century term?
No, I'm using it meaning he came out of my cock, okay? To save a lot of time, why don't you just ask them questions direct so we can get to the meat of things?
Well, I'm
talk
trying,
about
but I have to do it in
his mother.
What's that?
Let's talk about Jerry and his mother. Just get right to the meat of it.
Talk about who?
Jerry Farwell.
And his what?
And his mother, about him fucking his mother in the outhouse. You know, let's just
well, I'm going to come to that in a moment. You know that I'm here for that.
But you're swimming in circles, Mr. Grutman, and what's going to happen is the captain's going to teach you how to go in and out, if you don't hurry up, because he's going to terminate this thing. Go ahead. Now, you asked the question, and I'm demanding the time to answer it. And it's got to do with our sexual values. And I am telling you that that is what it's all about. Boy, you crawled out of one and you've been trying to crawl back in one ever since. And eventually you're going to realize that. And most of the people that work here in the BOP already know that. And they already know that a few people's got a drink out of a commode over there with some cigarette butts and shit in it, and it ain't going to be me.
What?
Farwell was very young.
What's that?
Farwell was very young.
Yes, how long ago was that?
Hell, I don't know what his age was. You know,
well, since you've read this affidavit, which attests to having observed the specific incident, tell me what the affidavit says so far as you recall.
Okay. Here's what the affidavit says, to the best of my recollection.
When?
To the best of my recollection, the affidavit says that Mr. Farwell was at the age of puberty, thereabouts, and that they caught him masturbating in an outhouse, looking at a picture of his mother and a Sears and Roebuck catalog.
His mother's picture was in the Sears and Roebuck catalog?
No, he had it hid in the Sears and Roebuck catalog. You know how sometimes they buy Hustler and put it in the Wall Street Journal? I guess that's what Farwell was doing in the outhouse. And so these three boys used to tease him all the time about catching him playing with himself. And they decided to watch him one day to see, you know, what he would do. And so his mother caught him once. And she taught him a little bit about the birds and the bees, you know.
Do these witnesses say that his mother had intercourse with him and they observed it?
Yes.
And where did they say that it occurred?
I believe they said it occurred in Missouri, but I'm not sure. We'll have to check the document.
Mm-hmm. Does the affidavit indicate how these boys who saw this were able to have observed this incident taking place?
Yeah, they were watching.
Where were they watching from?
Through the window of the house.
And they could see into the outhouse?
No, this happened. The first time was in the outhouse, okay, with the picture, see, and he was only masturbating. The next time he was a little older, and it took place in the house.
So these same boys who saw him masturbating with a picture of his mother in the Sears Roebuck catalog are the same people who saw him having intercourse with his mother, right?
Two of them are. The other ones.
Don't you think that stretches credulity just a little further than anybody would swallow it?
What's credulity, sir?
Okay.
What's credulity, sir?
Ambiguous.
At the time that this... Do you have an aversion or antipathy to organized religion?
You better bet your sweet ass I do.
And to the Bible?
Goddamn right I do.
Have you ever said, speaking of the Bible, this is the biggest piece of shit ever written?
You goddamn right I did.
Is that really a personally held conviction of your own?
You goddamn fucking right it is.
Do you believe that because of your aversion to the Bible and organized religion, that gives you license to hold up to ridicule and scorn leaders of religious movements?
Objection, it's irrelevant, it's argumentative.
Free expression is absolute.
It's absolute, including the dissemination?
Unequivocally.
Fine. And does that include, Mr. Flynt, disseminating things about the private lives of religious leaders?
Objection, it's irrelevant, it doesn't relate to this proceedings.
I will drop a dime on my mommy.
You'll drop a what?
A dime on my mother.
On your mother?
What that means is I am a wet snitch.
A what?
A wet snitch. Taken out of context. I said the government has no business being in your life, you know, if you're of consenting age. But what we got to stop doing is got to stop fucking with the kids. You know, you understand what I'm saying now? I mean, you adult faggots can do anything you want to up there at Time Inc. in New York. We don't really care. But when you mess with the kids, we got a special place for you down here at The Rock, you know, and it's over in Mechanic Services with Doolittle. And they'll take a shiv to your fat ass.
Questions and answers.
Mr. Flint, are you aware that you're testifying in a judicial proceeding and that although we're
I'm
not
testifying under oath, and I have a secret plan to win the war on obscenity and stop the molestation of children. And the way you do that is to keep Jerry Falwell off the air. Give him a pack of seed corn and send him to Israel and let him tell them what thou hast said. Let him learn to live on the West Bank and eat his manna and his corn. And he should take all the John Birches and the niggers with him too. But I tell you, I have got a photograph of Jerry Falwell masturbating, and I've got a photograph of him fucking some young girl. Now, if you want them, you're going to have to get them from the captain. Now, there's a big difference between civil rights and individual liberties, and you should learn the difference. I mean, an individual liberty is something I'd like to do right now, take a shit right on top of your head. But now civil rights is what these assholes over here are doing to me now. They're violating my civil rights by making me stand here and ask you to insult my intelligence.
Wasn't a little cramped answer, not after I kicked the goat out, close quote. Got any proof of that?
Yeah, the first time was a sheep.
Oh, it was the first time? You got a photograph of Reverend Falwell having coitus with a sheep?
Yes, I have.
You do? Where's that photograph?
It's in my property.
And where's that physically located?
Captain Sibley's got it.
Okay.
Yeah, he was fucking the goat. She caught him fucking the goat once. That's in the affidavit. You see what I'm saying?
No, I don't.
Well, they had some animals on their farm. So when Falwell was a little boy, he got caught by his mother, once masturbating, and another time screwing some of the animals on the farm. You know, I mean, you opened up this can of worms. I didn't.
You have any photographs or tape recordings which were in your possession before you caused this thing to appear?
Certainly do. They're in my room, and I give Captain Sibley permission to let you go in there and get them. And you know what? He ain't going to say no. He's going to let you have them.
Even do it? Can we do that during the lunch period?
We certainly can.
Thank you. Let that be clear. I'll do it during the lunch period. Okay. I'm almost finished with this, and then we can take the lunch. That for Reverend Falwell to function in his livelihood and in his commitment and career, he has to have an integrity which people believe in. Did you not appreciate that?
Yeah.
And was it one of your objectives to destroy that integrity or harm it if you could?
To assassinate it.
I am Larry Flynt. I hereby announce my candidacy for the presidency of these United States of America. On February 28th, I will enter the New Hampshire primary as a Republican. I am running as a Republican rather than a Democrat because I am wealthy, white, pornographic, and like the nuclear mad cowboy, Ronald Reagan,
I have been shot for what I believe in. My platform is simple. It's based on the concept of free thought, individual liberties, and civil rights for all mankind. If I am elected as your president, my goal will be to eliminate sexual ignorance and venereal disease. Every ounce of energy that I can muster, both psychologically and physically, will be devoted toward moving the massive repressive hand of government from the crotch of the American people. I will eliminate the bureaucracy in government by turning over most of its functions to private enterprise. The U.S. Post Office would be the first to go, for it could be operated a great deal more efficiently by someone from the private sector. I will immediately initiate legislation in Congress wherein all Americans who are qualified and able but fail to vote will be fined. The reason for this is that the American people, you, must realize that your voice is the only voice to be reckoned with, and it can only be heard by the casting of your ballot. I intend to reform the three bodies of government: legislative, executive, and judiciary. The House of Representatives would receive $120,000 a year salary. The Senate, $300,000. The Supreme Court, $100,000. The Vice President, $500,000. The President, $1 million. The reason for this is to ensure a separation of politician and bribes. I would also see that Congress is limited to 2 two-year terms, and the Senate 1 4-year term, and the President 1 2-year term. We don't need professional politicians in Washington trying to tell farmers how to grow their crops when they don't know the difference between a potato and an artichoke. We don't need politicians in Washington telling manufacturers how to run their manufacturing concerns. What we need is someone from a manufacturing family who knows and understands the business. Government should be conducted as a business, and I'll see that it's done exactly that way if I'm elected as your president. The Vice President will be the only elected member of government that can run for re-election as many times as he chooses. However, I would ask Congress for legislation wherein I could dismiss the Vice President whenever I chose fit, and his or her replacement would not require Senate confirmation. This is necessary because government should be run like a business. If my Vice President at Hustler is not doing his job, I'll fire him, and I'll be damned if I'll let anyone vote on who's going to replace him or her. I will propose legislation wherein Supreme Court justices will be limited to 1 2-year term. If they're going to legislate, then let them be responsible to their constituents. For over 200 years, we have had 9 people making decisions that have affected the lives of millions of Americans. My goal is to place the power where it belongs, in the hands of the people. And as Chief Executive Officer, I will mobilize the National Guard to eliminate fraudulent elections by supervising the voting booths and ballot tabulations. I would also ask Congress for legislation exempting U.S. servicemen from paying taxes. Their salary is a pittance as it is. I will create legislation declaring all Indian reservations independent and sovereign nations. That's right, I'm giving the land back to the Indians. I will seek total, absolute, and complete reforms in the area of health, education, and welfare. Teachers kindergarten through college will be paid at least $30,000 per year. The real obscenity in this nation today is that we pay the teachers who we expect to educate our children less than anyone else in our society. Needless to say, I will put my full support behind the ERA. As to foreign policy, I share the same philosophy as Thomas Paine. The world is my country, and I will offer the rest of the world the same principles that I have shared with you the American people. As the Lord is my shepherd, I shall prevail. And if he's not, maybe the atheists will look out for me. Many of you have heard that I'm an atheist. I realize today that I have neither the courage nor the intelligence to be an atheist. I have become agnostic for political purposes, and I may as well be agnostically gay so I can get the gay vote. Vote for me, and don't let them run your lives. I'll let you run your life. Send your political contributions to the Larry Flynt for President Committee, 364 St. Cloud, Bel Air, California, 90024. And don't be cheap. You don't have much time left. See you on Election Day. Thank you.
Mr. Flynt, may we ask your reaction to the Supreme Court decision?
No doubt I'm excited about it. We felt we had, excuse me, we felt we were in a winning position, but we didn't want to try to second guess the court. And I just finished reading the final opinion. I think it's a big victory not only for me, but it's a big victory for everyone. Because if they would have decided that Falwell could collect damages and not prove liable, and all they have to prove is infliction of emotional distress, well, he could sue anybody. Political cartoonists, some of them have problems today, but even though it's just borderline ones, they would all get the suits. And you can take the witness stand and you say, you know, I realize I'm not liable, but I haven't slept for 3 months. It's got my family all tore up, and I had emotional stress. So I mean, what a predicament that would have put the press in. It's absolutely unbelievable. I'm happy that all the major networks and all the major newspapers and national magazines all filed an amicus brief with the court stating that they supported my position on the case.
Some people call this a victory for satire, others call it a victory for pornography. What do you call it?
Well, it's clearly a victory for satire. You know, Justice Rehnquist, who wrote the opinion himself, at one time does he mention the word pornography or pornography. You know, it was a parody. The jury said it was a parody, but that it wasn't libel.
Falwell said today that he disagreed with the court because it gives people like you a green light to print whatever you like about public figures. How do you respond to that statement?
Well, you should have a green light to print whatever you want about public figures. And that's the way the press is always written. Sure, if they say something that is untrue, and you get in court, then that's a totally different situation. But otherwise, you can say what you want to do.
He also says you've got no right to be outrageous. What do you say to Falwell when he says you have no right to be outrageous?
Well, I mean, I don't win back. You know how his arguments are, you know. Depends on how he gets up in the morning. But if we would have lost any of the magazines that deal with heavy satire, and there were many of them that deal with just nothing but editorial content, would have to brace themselves for anticipated legal action.
What do you think of Justice Rehnquist? You become a close ally of his now?
I'm surprised that he wrote the majority opinion. I'm even more surprised that we won it 8-0.
You were surprised at the unanimous verdict.
Yes.
Why?
I was up there a year ago and cussed them out, you know. And I'm going out now and say review this case, and they didn't have no love for me. And personal feelings do enter into a lot of that, those decisions, whether whether they come out correct or not, but it happens.
Would you rerun the ad?
Yes, we probably will.
Which issue?
This is the issue here. First one, November '83, and it was this inside ad.
Can you hold that up for just a moment? I want to ask you, speaking directly, literally, to Jerry Falwell today, you got any messages for the Reverend Falwell?
I think he should stick to the pulpit and start policing his own kitchen, you know, and not trying to make a scapegoat out of everybody that don't think his way.
You're referring to Mr. Swaggart and others?
Yes.
What do you think of Jerry Falwell? I mean, you've had run-ins with him, obviously.
Very honestly, I've met hundreds of the evangelical type people. I was good friends with Ruth Carter Stapleton. I met a lot of people that she knew through him. And some of these people who pastor churches and pass the word, they're real believers, you know, and they really try to set their life and live that way and model their life. But those are so few and far between. I mean, some of the stories, you know, about some of the others, not just Swaggart and Falwell, it's so difficult to get anybody to go on the record. But some of the stories are just absolutely mind-boggling.
Is this worth all the money you've spent, attorney fees, and you're being arrested in the Supreme Court? Is it worth it all?
No, not really.
Why?
Well, I'm probably going to be, I get my $200,000 back, and I'm still going to be out around $1 million on attorney fees. But I would like for them to say that I paid my price for the First Amendment. And we pay a price for everything in today's society. That's toleration, is what that price is. You got to tolerate the things that are unpopular or that nobody likes. So I tolerate Jerry Falwell. He has to tolerate me. And I think I think the decision just strongly reaffirmed the court's case in Sullivan versus New York Times. You know, that's where we got the actual malice standard from. And I think because of that, this will always be a landmark case in history. Because Justice Rehnquist, wait a minute, I think he did say anything, maybe he did say that even if it was pornographic, that wouldn't have anything to do with the satire. I'm not sure. So maybe pornography is in there at one time. I don't know.
Was there anything else, Mr. Flynt, that you've been holding back on, waiting for a decision on this, that now you feel pretty good about, that you're going to go ahead with? Does this open any doors for you and let you go for other things?
I started in 1974, and I haven't changed anything yet, and I'm not going to. I put out a magazine for a specific audience. As long as that audience keeps buying and responding, I'll keep publishing.
Why do you think this was such an important case to fight, to spend your $1 million on, even though you're not going to be remunerated for that?
Well, my whole business is irreverence, aside from, the pornography. So to not win it is going to put me pretty much out of business. But to win it, it's not only a victory for me, but it's a victory for anyone else, that's walking on the threads, walking on the borderlines.
Some would call you a dubious defender of the First Amendment. Your response?
Well, they tell me, don't hide behind the First Amendment. I said, it's mine as well as yours. Thank God we've got one to hide behind.
Are you going to take advantage of, in effect, what's happened here? In what way are you going to take advantage of? Try to recover your $1 million.
We'll have a very interesting. We will devote a few pages to bring that back to life.
You're going to go back and visit Mr. Falwell again?
Well, I don't know about visiting him, but I might visit some of his neighbors.
Whereas you're not finished with Mr. Falwell, despite the fact that he is
coming off. He is a pompous bag of wind. You know, he says things, and when he gets off camera, it's just like he didn't even know what he said. It's like all the different times he's put his foot in his mouth, like saying that Reverend or Bishop Tutu was a liar or something. And then this guy on the radio station up here caught him on a lie, or he'd said something on a particular tape, and Falwell said, "I'll pay you $5,000 if you get me that tape." So he got the tape and took him to court, and San Francisco, and he had to pay him. I mean, if you just follow again that guy's footsteps and see some of the things, the debris that falls out, it's something.
Could you reiterate, please, why this fight was so important to you and why you were willing to spend all this money, even though you probably will not recover it?
Well, I felt that I had to do it. I had to defend the First Amendment, just as the landmark cases before me that have given us the press freedom we have today, like Ulysses, Fanny Hill, Lady Chatterley's Lover. All these are well-known epic books that at one time in this country were charged with obscenity and prosecuted. This is just another part of that. Someone not liking your politics or your taste, and they're going to sue you. And I felt it's got to be one, or we're going to turn the clock back, to the 18th century. And even though I appreciate everybody coming on board at the end there when they did, where all the network's vice presidents were there, and all the major media, they all showed up at the court to listen to the arguments. But if they would have been in there with me on the first day that trial started, in Norfolk, maybe we could have averted having this whole thing the way it is.
So you would place your magazine in the same category of the literature you just mentioned? When you talked about Lady Chatterley's Lover, you would place your magazine in the same category?
The reason why I mention those is because those three cases are very important cases, getting the First Amendment, what you can say and what you can do in print. And Hustler is just, a continuation of that. I think we can say free speech is protected in America right now. And it's so good.
Has this renewed your faith in the American justice system? I know at times you've not been pleased with the court's rulings.
Yeah, it does give me a little faith, unbelievably, it does.
Could this case have won on its own merit without $1 million and some brilliant lawyers? Could it have stood by itself?
Well, that's an interesting question. I would answer that yes, because the question was just so basic. The jury didn't find liable, but they wanted to give him damages for you hurting his feelings. That was the whole argument in 5 minutes. But we had briefs stacked, 20 feet high to make the same point, and it should have been a very simple appeal. But we wanted to win, and we spent the money.
Thank you.
Can you give me an idea of who some of the neighbors of Falwell will be that you might take up
They have their book burnings, you know, and their Saturday night record burnings and stuff. I think the people has to be told that these people are out there.
But what about deeply inflammatory speech? See, this is where I slightly take issue with a man's right to free speech. I totally subscribe to. I've been a journalist all my life. I was a newspaper editor in Britain for 10 years. I get this argument, and I've defended it passionately like you. But even now, I get to the stage where I feel there must be limits. When I see this idiot talking about burning the Quran, I think there should be something that stops him doing that, because the consequences are so serious.
When I first started out, I used to buy into a former Supreme Court Justice's argument that you can't scream fire in a crowded theater. Well, I think you can. If somebody gets hurt as a result of that, you can prosecute them for the act. But if you start compromising the First Amendment, you're on a slippery slope. Now, I think nothing was more tasteful than that preacher burning the Koran, or also the other preacher that was protesting some soldier's funeral where he come home, you know. I mean, those are bizarre incidents. But we can't set aside one of the most important things that the framers gave us, free speech, for the purpose of dealing with these idiots.
And you believe that it should always be unfettered, that there should never be any limits?
I don't think you put any limits. I don't think you compromise it. There's certain things in life you don't compromise, and one is free speech.
We have breaking news. Larry Flynt, the controversial founder of Hustler magazine, has died. Flynt died today at his home here in L.A. from heart failure. Flynt had been in a wheelchair since 1978 when a white supremacist serial killer shot him in an attempted murder. It was in retaliation for Hustler publishing images of interracial sex. Flynt was a high school dropout who founded a porn empire. He had numerous clashes with the religious right. He became known as a free speech advocate after numerous court battles involving the First Amendment. Flynt also shaped the business landscape here in SoCal with his Hustler stores and casino. Larry Flynt was 78 years old.